My face was just pounded by the airbag that went off in front of me, and it just about took my breath away. It happened so fast, I barely had time to think about what just happened in the last 2 seconds. My seatbelt locking me into place, preventing me from flying through the windshield. Then with tears running down my face, I thought to myself, why didn't this work? I faintly remember hearing the smashing and cracking of the car as it crushed in all around me and people running over to get me out. The car door was so jammed it had to be pulled off its hinges in order for me to get out. My legs were jammed, and as 2 men pulled me out, my left leg gave out, so they carried me across the street and placed me down in the grass. As they carried me across the street, I looked over at the car they just pulled me from, and I was amazed that I just survived. The whole front of the car was crushed in all the way past the front seats of the car, but it was as if there was a protective barrier around my seat. The car was a complete write-off, but I wasn't. I was 16 years old, and I had just purposely crashed my car into a pole going 80 kilometers an hour. What was going through my mind, you may wonder? I'm not worthy of life. I'm a burden to those around me. I'm a waste of space. I just want to die. That was the last time I tried to end my life. I was lucky enough to walk away from that accident with only minor whiplash. Some people are not as lucky. And that was a turning point in my life, and when I finally realized that if I am meant to live, I need to live it the way I want to and the way I always hoped I could. So when I was released from the psychiatric ward for the 3rd and final time, I started a new chapter in my life. I graduated high school with good grades. I stopped taking the medications that weren't helping me. I started using the coping skills I had been taught. I went to college to become a counselor, and when I wasn't happy doing that, I dropped out despite not knowing what I was going to do next. But what I did know was that I was going to give myself a fighting chance at living a good life, which I deserved. Now I'm going to back up a bit. What was it that led me to that moment when I thought I would rather die than live just one more second? At 12 years old, I started to get bullied pretty bad, and it got to the point where I isolated myself and started to get depressed. I was starting to become a shell of the happy-go-lucky kid I once was. At 13 years old, I thought about ending my life for the first time because of this. Between 14 and 15 years old, some unfortunate situations happened to me which hurt me both mentally and emotionally. And at 15, I started to display symptoms of borderline personality disorder and was later diagnosed at 16. There are many symptoms that go with BPD, but the ones that I started to exhibit on a daily basis were extreme sensitivity, like having an exposed nerve ending. Small things could trigger intense reactions. Persistent fear of abandonment and rejection, intense, highly changeable moods, suicidal thoughts and/or actions, and unhealthy attachments to people. I could experience all of these symptoms all within an hour. Some people would label us as dramatic, a drama queen, over the top, attention-seeking, and manipulative. I have been called all of these, most surprisingly by counselors and psychiatrists. Between the ages of 13 and 16, I tried to end my life multiple times and frequently self-harmed. At times, I tried to end my life once a week because the emotional pain felt much greater than any happiness I could have in this life. I spent time in the psychiatric ward 3 times in 2 different hospitals and went through numerous counselors and was put on numerous medications with little success. Medications numb me emotionally, but they didn't solve the problem, which is like putting a Band-Aid on an infection. Then when you take that Band-Aid off, the infection is still there. When I stopped taking my medications, the pain was still there. Being labeled mentally ill really changed the way I looked at myself. I saw myself as an outsider in my group of friends. I felt as though I was doomed to live a miserable life and that this was as good as it was going to get for me. Because of the stigma that goes along with mental illness, I didn't talk about it with anyone outside my immediate family. I didn't want anyone to know my secret for fear that once they knew, they wouldn't want to be around me anymore. So instead, I suffered alone and in silence. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
It's all good.
It's all
Suffered
good.
alone in silence.
You're beautiful.
Okay, you suffered in silence. Then what did you do after that?
I know. Sorry.
Take your time.
It'll come to you. It happens to you.
You started writing it down?
Okay, I'm gonna start that paragraph over and I'm gonna hope that it comes to me.
Go girl.
Okay. Being labeled mentally ill changed the way I looked at myself. I saw myself as an outsider in my group of friends. I felt as though I was doomed to live a miserable life and that this was as good as it was ever going to get for me. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I don't get I felt as though I would be treated differently by my friends and family, that teachers wouldn't give me the same opportunity in class, that I wouldn't measure up to the same standards as everyone else, like I was somehow less than. Because of this, my self-confidence and self-worth were at its lowest. I had always wanted to be a nurse, but I never believed I was smart enough to be accepted into such a competitive program, so I ditched that dream. But on that day, July 2nd, 2009, I finally realized that I could no longer allow a diagnosis to run my life. I had let it dictate what my life was going to look like for too long. It was now time for me to sit in the front seat and steer myself in the direction I wanted to go in life. I had to do what I wanted to do and not let anything get in the way of that. Oh my gosh.
Did you become a nurse?
You're steering in the direction it will look like, right? So what changed from when you had the diagnosis to, what did you do after it?
Well, I went back to school in 2013 and I got accepted into nursing school and I succeeded. I got my first nursing job at one of the leading addiction treatment facilities in Canada called Freedom from Addiction. Back in December, I took a leap of faith and I moved to Victoria, BC, where I lived and worked as a nurse for 6 months. That's where I just came back from. A province that I've always wanted to live in, but never believed at 26 I would get that opportunity. Writing has always been an outlet for me, so in the midst of my chaos, I started writing in hopes that it would turn into a book to help others. Today I'm a self-published author of 3 books, 2 of which describe those years of my life and how I got through. And I've recently just gone down the road of public speaking. I never would have imagined my life would be as good as it is right now, and I am blessed to have survived and thrived and to live the life that I do now. That's not to say that I don't struggle to this day. I still deal with symptoms of BPD and depression and anxiety, just not to the extreme that I used to. I don't think I will ever be completely free of this mental illness, but I will just continue to learn how to manage it in a much better way. I didn't choose to have this mental illness, but what I did choose was how I was going to live despite it. I may have a mental illness, but the mental illness does not have me, and that is where my power lies. Dictate how your life is going to be. It has no say in how your life is going to turn out, but rather is what you decide your life is going to be. We all deserve to live out our dreams, to do what we want to do. It is our human right. Our voices deserve to be heard, and they deserve to be heard in order to end the stigma. Let's educate, not discriminate. And to those of you who struggle with mental illness, I want you to know this. You are strong, you are beautiful, you are brave, you are not the labels people throw at you. You are incredibly powerful, and you are most definitely important. Take life by the reins and steer it in the direction you want to go. Anything is possible, and you can live out your dreams. I know firsthand. Thank you.